Welcome back, guys. I hope you guys had a wonderful Lunar New Year. We are back here with the Year of the Rabbit. And in this video, I'm going to be going over the new content that we got for Lunar New Year. This video will encompass all of my thoughts on the newest ships that just came out. Additionally, on February 1st, we'll be switching over to the new Cruise Mission Pass. This will bring us Sheffield META, which we will go over today as well. And if you were wondering what the skin we will get for the Cruise Mission Pass, it is Yugure. If you have any further questions after this video, then make sure to join us during our next live stream, in which we'll be doing this full event live, and you can ask any of your questions there. And before we continue on with the rest of the video, can I just say that I'm so excited that Alabama finally got a skin? Anyway, without further ado, let's go into the ships. Let's start with the ship that hasn't been released yet. Sheffield META. She actually wears panties in this version of her timeline, so let's see how that affects her. Stat-wise, like all meta ships, she's very similar to her base form. However, she's definitely more aggro. She has slight increases in her firepower, torpedo, and reload stats at the expense of having lower HP, evasion, and anti-air. She's basically a more aggro version of her original self. Her first skill says that when she fires her main gun at the same enemy 12 times, or when she activates her Ashen Might skill, which is her barrage that fires every 8 times she fires her main gun, she increases her firepower by 12% for the next 10 seconds. This does not stack but can be refreshed, and fires a special barrage. Enemies hit by this special barrage are given an Ashen Mark debuff for 5 seconds, which increases the shelling damage they take by 4%. This basically would give her a lot of ability for barrages, and if you're fighting a single target like a boss, you'll get extra barrages. Her second skill increases her crit rate by 70% against enemies with the Ashen Mark debuff, which applied from the first skill. Unfortunately, that only applies to her crit rate, not anyone else's. Also, when the battle starts, if there are 3 ships in your vanguard, increase this ship's damage dealt by 10%. Overall, she feels like a pretty big cookie cutter meta ship. She's definitely more focused on damage than her original form, but she doesn't have a main gun +1, and her base stats leave a lot to be desired if she's going to be a damage-dealing vanguard ship. Generally, I think she's going to be collection only. Alright, let's move on to the other ships that are already in the game. Yes, I know I'm a little bit behind this week. Since I already know what all these ships do and have read them well before this video, I'm going to spare you from me directly reading what their skills do and skip to the parts that I think are important for each ship. And that will hopefully save us a little bit of time in this video. So we're going to start it off with the newest gotcha ships, followed by the reward ships, and then move on to the ships that got upgraded, before finally going over the new equipment. So first up, we have the SR Russian light cruiser Kuybyshev. Immediately, she draws a lot of comparison for me to Seattle. They both have main gun +1s and have very similar firepower stats. Seattle focuses a little bit more on the light cruiser main gun. Kuybyshev has a little bit more advantage in her auxiliary destroyer gun, but overall the damage output between her and Seattle should be somewhat comparable. Kuybyshev actually is a little bit more offensive oriented than Seattle. That comes from mainly her barrage. This is a very nice HE ammo barrage. It triggers at 3 seconds into the battle and can really help. However, I'm not a huge fan of the fact that after that 3-second mark that's guaranteed, you have to wait 20 seconds, and that only happens at a 70% chance proc rate. That chance is not that great and it's kind of slow, but that does help her damage output. Her second skill has a lot going on. It actually just helps her firepower and accuracy by 15%, so that's going to help her be a little bit above Seattle on top of her barrage, so that's great. The 10% damage reduction seems great, and it's not bad, but it only applies to her, it only applies to shelling damage, and you have to put another Soviet ship in your fleet, which may not be optimal. Don't feel like you need to put another Russian ship in the fleet to proc this damage reduction, but you're probably going to want to because it will help with her survivability. The best part of this skill is actually probably the once per battle, when a total of 25% of her max HP is lost, which is actually just meaning she has to be at 75% heal. Technically, she has to lose that 25% 100% in the current battle. Like if she comes in at 80% and goes down to 75, it won't trigger. She'd need to lose 25% in that specific battle. But when that happens, she heals for 8%, and that's really just nice. She's got a little bit of a zombie skill. And additionally, she's going to add 30% crit damage to your other Russian Vanguard ships, and that's pretty much what she has to offer. Overall, she's a pretty solid SR ship, especially from a mini event like this one. I would personally consider picking her up because you can throw her in your mob fleet with Kronstadt. Kronstadt is obviously used in a lot of mob fleets, especially in Operation Siren, because of her cross-fleet buff to spread on your battleships. So throwing her in a Kronstadt mob fleet can be pretty decent, especially if you are newer and don't have 4 full fleets fully upgraded for Operation Siren. Overall, I'm pretty happy with this ship's design. Nothing spectacular, but she just feels like a more aggro version of Seattle. Alright, next up we have the SR British light aircraft carrier Theseus. Now, typically with light aircraft carriers, I don't like to talk too much about their stats because they're really meant to be support characters. Theseus, on the other hand, is not really like that. She's actually trying to be a damage-dealing light aircraft carrier. She has the second highest aviation stat of any of the light aircraft carriers, behind only Albion, and she has a 15% boost to her aviation stat, although Albion potentially has a 25% boost. One thing that she has that's really nice over almost any other light aircraft carrier in the game is the loadout of her planes. Typically, light aircraft carriers are weighted more towards fighters, and it's not uncommon for them to be having less planes than a traditional carrier. Theseus has a full 8 planes, and she only has 2 of them be fighters. She's got 3 dive bombers and 3 torpedo bombers. This is going to be really helpful in her surface damage that she can provide. Additionally, her first skill brings in extra planes. It brings in a special airstrike that brings in 9 extra parallel torpedoes. That happens at 3 seconds after the battle starts, so it's effectively like a mini preloaded airstrike, and then it happens in addition to every airstrike she ever does, so that's like an extra set of planes that are coming with her launch. Also, don't sleep on the second part of that skill. Any ship that's been around for more than 10 seconds will get 15% more damage from her. Her first airstrike is coming after that 10-second mark, so if an enemy starts at the beginning and stays alive until she launches, she's going to be dealing extra damage just on top of everything. This is going to be good for even PvP, although I wouldn't say this ship's good for PvP, but it's just like that skill is meant for that, and it's good for bosses and things that are sticking around a little bit longer than you'd hope. And even her second skill brings in more of this, helping with this schedule of damage. Obviously, we already talked about her buffing the hit stat and the aviation by 15%, but every 12 seconds she launches an AP barrage that scales based on her aviation stat. It's going to help with destroying boats that are getting in on her in your PvE battles. And that 12 seconds, once again, is right after that 10-second mark. If an enemy spawns at the beginning and sticks around until she has it, she's going to be doing extra damage with that first skill. I like it. And her third skill is completely unrelated to damage. She is Perseus's sister after all, so she's got to have a heal every 10 seconds after the battle starts. She's going to heal only herself and only 1%, so like it's basically not a real impactful heal at all, but maybe you can get 3 to 5% extra heal every battle, so okay. She also has an ammo debuff. It reduces the damage reduction by 15%, so not that impactful. You still want to avoid those, but if you're in like World 14 and you are in a situation where you have to take an ammo debuff, it can be nice. And furthering on with this skill, helping out with being in a fleet that's doing a lot of battles, she is also going to be able to stack the amount of damage reductions that she can take. Only applies to her. It's only 3.5%, can stack 3 times, but even then it's only 10.5%. This last skill just feels like they are trying to make her like a sister of Perseus, because the first 2 skills actually have her do a lot of damage and focus around her being a damage dealing light aircraft carrier, which we don't have any ships that did that really well. And this is one of the things that is problematic with trying to do this for light aircraft carriers, is they are just so far behind what the best meta slot damage dealing carriers can do. And really, it's just kind of hard for her to, like, it's hard for me to recommend to anybody to take her as a damage dealer. And you can't take her as a healer. She only heals herself, and obviously her sister is so much better at healing. And her sister even has preloaded, so it's even better in mobbing in a lot of situations. Like, yeah, sure, getting the debuffs on the ammo debuff is kind of nice, but she's really just not supporting it. Like, even if we're trying to go into a mob fleet, which is where she's supposed to be, and we're running only HMS, and we're trying to do like aircraft carrier focus, we're trying to be in the long run like World 14 and things like that with submarines, it's really, really hard for me to not be like Perseus Albion as your two carriers with a battleship. And I don't think she takes that spot. So while I think she's interesting in the way that they tried to implement a damage dealing light aircraft carrier, I don't really see a use for her. And that's kind of disappointing, but I love the artwork of her wings. All right, there's only one last ship in this gacha, and it's an elite. It is the Chinese light aircraft carrier Hwah Jah. And this was the new ship that I was the most excited about in this event, which is ironic, but it was because it's finally another backliner for the Chinese fleet. Before, we only had Chenhai, and then we could kind of play around with our missile destroyers and push them to the back line. So Hwah Jah is going to be very interesting when we're comparing her to Chenhai. Obviously, an elite light aircraft carrier is probably not going to be used anywhere outside the Chinese faction, so I'm going to be talking about her simply as a replacement to Chenhai and in a full Dragon Emperor fleet. She's actually even more of a proper light aircraft carrier than Chenhai. She's got 6 planes rather than Chenhai's option of 2. She doesn't have any garbage focus on firepower that's meaningless. She's got a lot more HP. So while she's not a good light aircraft carrier, she's definitely focused more like an actual aviation damage dealing ship. Of course, she has 6 seaplanes, and those are the worst type of planes in the whole game, even worse than fighters. So that's not really saying that much, but at least it's a step up from where Chenhai was. Also, Chenhai requires your fleet to be fully Chinese. Like, if there is anyone that's not Chinese, she doesn't get her good barrage that she needs to be any bit useful. Hwah Jah instead actually acts as giving you a buff for more that you bring. You can bring obviously 6 in a fleet, and that will buff your aviation and your hit stat by 24%, which is meaningful. Of course, she also decreases the damage she takes by 10% when you do that. And while those are like Chenhai that only affect her, she also applies a buff to your Vanguard. They take 15% less damage for 8 seconds when she launches her airstrike. Also, every time she launches her airstrike, she gets stronger on the next one. She stacks 5% extra damage dealt for the next one, and that stacks 3 times to a max of 15%. And she also gets a special airstrike. That special airstrike is, of course, seaplanes, so it sucks, but when we're comparing her to Chenhai, she's actually an upgrade. And given I think it's very hard to have any of these ships take the spot of a missile destroyer, we are still needing a flagship for the Chinese faction. So if you are ever planning on running the Chinese faction fleet, she is something you should pick up. All right, that is it with the gacha ships, but we still have another reward ship, which you can get from grinding the main story and obtaining fireworks. It is the Chinese elite munition ship Ting An. Her stats are awful. She's got no firepower, no torpedoes, abysmal health and evasion, and she's light armor, and she's trying to be an aircraft carrier in the Vanguard with 3 seaplanes and 159 aviation maxed out. Holy crap, all of her stats are awful beyond belief. I think she's also the slowest ship in the game, so the fact that one of her skills buffs her speed by 10 is laughable. I mean, I guess it makes sense. She's got a heavy load to carry. Her only redeeming quality really is that every 20 seconds she gets to target 2 random ships and buff them by 8% of the best stat that they can apply. Destroyers get torpedoes, cruisers get firepower, battleships get hit stat, carriers get aviation stat, and everyone else gets anti-air stat. This is good, except that you rely completely on chance that you hit the ship that you want in your fleet, and at the cost of basically just throwing away this slot. Like 8% for throwing away this slot, you could just use Aurora and get better results. If she has cargo, she can reduce the burn damage of herself and other Dragon Emperor aircraft carriers, so she's trying to like buff aircraft carriers, and you'll see when we get into the equipment, her specific equipment also tries to do that, the Type Wu seaplane. And so she's really trying to focus on if you want to run like a carrier variant of the Chinese fleet, which is all just seaplanes and is a terrible idea, and please don't do it. It doesn't matter if you get a 30% aviation buff, it's still terrible. Her airstrike also is like 4 500-pound bombs, so it's not even that important. Like, this ship is awful, terrible, collection only, and I'm sure all of you are going to get her anyway because I know reasons. All right, we also have to talk about 2 already great ships that got upgrades to make them even better. Friedrich der Grosse has been waiting for her Fate Simulated +5. It's finally here, and now she can have access to her 25 luck, which is very important. Yes, DRs get 25 luck. And just like Azuma, she's also going to get upgrades to 2 of her skills. Her Symphony of Destruction barrage gets buffed. Now it will not matter where she is in your fleet. It will fire from the flagship position. Additionally, on top of firing when the enemy gets close enough, it will also fire when her main guns fire. So now she's a barrage battleship. The extra barrages are definitely welcome, and the fact that you can now place her anywhere you want makes fleet building restrictions a little bit easier. Her Rhapsody of Darkness skill buff gets completely reworked. Instead of having all of these different buffs that vary at her HP pool differences, she will forever get a 20% firepower boost and forever a 20% decrease in damage taken. That alone would just be amazing. On top of that, she also gets, when her HP falls below 30%, she increases her secondary gun velocity by 15%, so okay, and she increases her secondary gun efficiency by 30%. So basically, she's going to be able to shoot down those suicide boats or enemy vanguards coming into range a little bit easier when she's low on health. But ultimately, instead of having to wait and determine what her skill is going to be based on her HP, she gets the 2 most important ones from the start and the whole time, making her a lot tankier, which is great because Musashi and New Jersey were all kind of, power creeping her a lot. So this is really good for FDG, and I think she's going to see some more usage in tanking stuff. I'm not sure this makes her better than Musashi, but this definitely puts her back on the meta landscape. Finally, the last ship that we're going to talk about today is Yat Sen. She finally got a retrofit. Both her main gun and secondary guns get 15% boost to their efficiency. Her AA mount gets 5% boost. She gets 240 extra HP, 55 extra firepower, 5 extra reload, 35 extra anti-air, and 15 extra evasion. On top of that, she gets upgrades to 2 of her skills. Her most busted skill, which gave a decrease to damage taken by 20% and an increase to evasion rate by 30%, has been broadened. Now it works whenever she's sortied with any Chinese ship, not just Pinghai and Ninghai. This is important because the Chinese fleet is moving away from the China wall of Pinghai and Ninghai, but Yat Sen is still kind of being used, and now she can, work with Harbin and will get all of the tankiness that she needs. Additionally, all of your Chinese ships are going to deal 5% more damage when this happens, so now she actually becomes a damage support ship. This skill change is directly related to the change of direction from the Chinese fleet. It's moving away from the China wall and towards the missile destroyers, as well as the light aircraft carriers with the seaplane tenders. This change alone helps ensure that Yat Sen will be in the Chinese vanguard for the foreseeable future. She also gets a brand new skill that helps her be a better support as well. It also gives her 8 speed, which helps the vanguard go zoom zoom. It also gives her some extra damage with an AP barrage that fires every 12 seconds. And you are going to want to enhance this barrage with the Plum-Petal poetry gear. Not because the barrage is that much better, but because it decreases the damage your other Chinese ships take. 5% for your other vanguard ships, 10% for your other main fleet ships. Man oh man, is Yat Sen the center of the Chinese fleet now. I mean, she kind of was before, but she definitely solidifies that with her retrofit. This is a great retrofit. And we haven't even talked about her new item that you need to put on her because of this final new skill. So I think that's a perfect segue to talk about equipment now. We'll start off with Yat Sen's new equipment. Yat Sen's new equipment is one of those 550 HP SR equipments. Of course, it goes to 640 when you plus 13 it. At the very least, you can use it on your destroyers for some extra HP. It is used to proc Yat Sen's new retrofit skill. And if it's on Yat Sen, it has an additional effect. It has the scatter plum petals in the breeze, and it's for the first 5 battles of every sortie. It deploys a barrier that lasts 30 seconds and negates 5% of this ship's max damage. So 5% of Yat Sen's max damage, she gets a shield. So it's basically a shield for Yat Sen. It triggers her retrofit skin. It's a bunch of HP, which Yat Sen needs because she's got great evasion. This is a must equip on Yat Sen. You need to pick this up if you plan on running Yat Sen, and you need Yat Sen if you plan on running a Chinese fleet. That simple. So next up, we will talk about another equipment that was mentioned in a skill of a new ship, and that is the Maui type Wu. It is a cargo equipment despite looking like an airplane. It gives 300 HP, 315 at plus 13, and 35 aviation, 38 at plus 13. It also has a skill when equipped by Ting An. It increases your main fleet's aviation by 10%. This is interesting. This is slightly interesting because it doesn't stipulate that it must be Chinese ships only, so it can be used with any of your carriers. This is only slightly better than a Kashino with an aviation materials, but you're really giving up a lot of survivability as well as a lot of damage that could come from your Vanguard. You're really giving up a lot to get this little 2% extra boost. I'm sure someone somewhere is going to come up with some Vanguard fleet that uses this in order to maximize aviation-based damage for a boss that can only take damage efficiently from aviation with a full, like, UR carrier backline or something like that, where it might be worth it for, like, one boss ever. But really, I don't see this being as a redeeming, like, Ting An is good or useful now, but if you are going to use Ting An, it's for this type Wu plane to buff 10%. By the way, 10% aviation stat. It's not even like 10% damage like any of those other really good buffers like Kazagumo. Not really worth that much thought, but if you're gonna get it for free, why not? Let's move on to the final equipment, the one that you'll get by your server clearing the Russian world boss, the Fairy Magic Poster. It's basically just an SG radar with 1 extra hit stat, so that's nice, but technically it's worse than the Awakening Pearl, which has 2 extra hit stats compared to the SG radar. That being said, the Fairy Magic Poster has an additional skill. When equipped with a Russian ship, it increases the luck of that ship by 5, and the first 3 times that that ship takes damage each battle, that damage is reduced to 1. Both of those are actually really good, and I think that you're going to want to use this on a Russian ship definitely, although if you don't, it's still just a better SG radar, so still definitely something you want to pick up. Giving a Yukikaze-like skill guaranteed for a Russian ship is actually really nice. This, with the hit stat and the evasion and the luck and the damage reduction, is like perfectly built for Kronstadt. And so yeah, this is a great item. You need to pick it up. I'm sure it will be useful in the future, and I actually would say it's useful now too. All right guys, that is the review for all the new content that we got for Lunar New Year this year. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I will be doing the rest of this event in the live stream later today, so hopefully you can come join me for that. Thank you guys for watching, and until next time.